Topping today's news, a young man gunned down in the Kennedy subdivision community late Wednesday night. Gun violence having a negative impact on the nation's healthcare system. Today marks the 58th anniversary of Black Tuesday, and legendary boxer Ray Manus Jr. passes away. I'm Jcn. This is your Jcn Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Another overnight homicide here in the capital, pushing the country's murder count up a notch. The latest killing happening in the Kennedy subdivision area. Police say a 21-year-old male was killed while sitting on the porch of his residence. Chief Superintendent Police Officer Jcn Skippings giving further details.
Shortly before 11 p.m., police were notified via its shot spotter technology of gunshots being discharged in the Kennedy subdivision, more specific, Lily Way. Our information is very limited at this time. However, we can say that the victim was seated outside his apartment complex. We cannot say how many assailants he was confronted by, but we do know that he was shot multiple times. He attempted to evade them, running inside his apartment, where he succumbed to his injuries. That's as much information as we have regarding the incident. However, we do make an appeal to members of the public, those who live in this immediate area, those who may have any information regarding this incident. We would like for you to reach out to the Criminal Investigations Department or the Southeastern Division, that's your East Street South Police Station, or even the Urban Renewal Centers to provide any information that you may have regarding this latest homicide.
With many Bahamians in the country being concerned with what seems to be a growing lawlessness and criminality in the country, many quarters are calling for the government to do more. Chief Superintendent Skippings gives an update on police efforts.
At this time, I also want to inform that shortly before this incident occurred, as you know, we have Commissioner spoke to saturation patrols being ongoing. We have a number of vehicles on the ground right now throughout the island of New Providence. And those saturation patrols have yielded, like I said, just before this incident occurred, and a young man being found in possession of a handgun and ammunition while on Claridge Road. We have identified the hotspots within New Providence, and so we have our units patrolling those areas on a very constant and regular basis in an attempt to prevent and minimize these sorts of incidents from occurring within our community. This incident in this particular community tonight is most unfortunate because this is a very quiet community. This community we don't come to. It's very, very quiet. We haven't seen incidents of this occurring. And so we're definitely going to beef up our patrols in this particular community as well.
Chief Superintendent Skippings makes the appeal to Bahamians that this is our country and that the crime concern can only be better when the police and the community work hand in hand. She appeals to parents to take responsibility for your children, even those who may be young adults and are at risk for resorting to violence and criminal behavior. A 33-year-old male is in police custody after he was allegedly found in possession of an unlicensed firearm and ammunition. According to information received shortly after 12 a.m. Thursday, police were conducting a saturation patrol in the area of Wolf Road and Claridge Road. While doing so, occupants of a blue Nissan March were intercepted. It was during this time that the passenger of that vehicle exited and ran away, leaving the driver behind. Subsequently, the search was conducted, which resulted in the discovery of a high-powered weapon and ammunition. The male resident of Claridge Road was then arrested. Investigations continue into that matter as well. With the ongoing crime crisis, particularly as it relates to gun violence, the question has been raised: how is our medical system dealing with emergency cases, especially those personnel at the Princess Margaret Hospital? Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Michael Dovell says the spike in gun violence is indeed putting a strain on the healthcare services.
If there is a violent act and someone is hurt, it is the responsibility for the emergency medical team to respond. That puts a burden on the healthcare services. And then we are trying to provide services at an accident emergency while while we're renovating the accident emergency. And when we do have a medical emergency associated with some violent act, there are other people who have to be placed aside while we address the emergency, because that's the way how it works in the accident emergency with triage. So violent crimes, gun violence, and so forth, affects the delivery of healthcare services. We are doing all in our power, the ministry, to try to mitigate the effects, while the Ministry of National Security and all the associated ministries are working very diligently to try to get a grip on what is happening, not only in the Bahamas. This is a regional issue, but the Bahamas needs to do what it needs to do for our population.
Dr. Dovell says the management of the country's primary health facility, blood bank, is also a concern. In light of this, a recruitment process has begun to source more manpower and equipment.
The management of the blood bank is of concern to myself and Aubernet Roll, the managing director of the Public Hospitals Authority. Me and the managing director traveled to Cuba about a week or two ago, where we are in the process of recruiting manpower resources, lab technicians, x-ray technicians, physiotherapists, and the list goes on and on. There's a shortage of medical technologists in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And we also face a challenge at the Princess Margaret Hospital with some individuals retiring. In view of what we are encountering, we realize that we have to activate a short, medium, and long-term plan.
To address the overall challenges at Princess Margaret Hospital, Dr. Dovell says the short-term plan is inclusive of bringing in manpower and resources. The medium-term plan is to train Bahamian nurses to replace those that have retired. And the long-term plan is the construction of a new nursing college and hospital here on New Providence, which will include a new blood bank. The Ministry of Education, Technical and Vocational Training will hold its National Town Hall meeting tonight, April 27th at 8 o'clock on the topic of strengthening school attendance for learning recovery. Leading the meeting will be Education Minister Glenys Hannah Martin, who says the results of the virtual learning during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic has been catastrophic to children across the Bahamas. The Town Hall meeting attempts to encourage parents to get students back into the classroom.
So when we got back to face-to-face instruction, we undertook to do two things. One is to ensure that we get our young people back into school. We engaged attendance, we hired attendance monitors who hit the ground. They're working from urban renewal centers, and they are on the ground finding young people and children and getting them back into the classroom. We've also partnered with the Office of the Prime Minister in an initiative to work with schools most greatly affected by missing children, to see how we can get those young people back into the classroom. So this is one of the initiatives we'll be discussing tonight, because if they're not in the classroom and they're of school age, mandatory school age attendance, where are they? We have to find them, because the implications are quite worrying.
Another topic of discussion will be the major issue of learning loss and bridging existing gaps.
And so what we undertook was a universal testing of our young people in schools nationwide, 140 schools. Of the 40,000 plus children and young people, we have completed the first round of testing of 35,000 young people. The 5,000 that have not been tested incorporate some of those young people we've not been able yet to bring into the mix. And so we continue that work. There are some other issues with access to internet, etc., in the schools where the children are attending. But by and large, these are the children we're seeking to find and bring into the net. There's a second round of testing now underway, and simultaneously there is remediation or a bridging of the gap where learning gaps have been identified. We are doing this because if we do not address this issue with these young people, these thousands and thousands and thousands of young people who have been adversely affected by this pandemic in terms of their isolation and their alienation in some instances, and also the impact on their learning, the implications for our progress, our development, and our social stability are quite worrying.
She has hopes that this meeting will provide the public with some sense of confidence that the Davis administration is doing all that it can to address the learning crisis. The town hall meeting will be viewed tonight, 8 p.m. on ILTV and ZNS TV. It can also be found on the Office of the Prime Minister's Facebook page and the Ministry of Education's Facebook page. The government giving an update on the beautification project to the downtown area. Minister of Tourism, Investments and Aviation Chester Cooper says his ministry is considering several projects and reviewing traffic flow studies to consider making some streets pedestrian traffic only. DPM Cooper also noting that so far 6 abandoned buildings have already been demolished in the downtown area, and additionally there are 9 proposed structures considered to be eyesores also willing to be or looking to be demolished.
There is a process that must be undertaken. The owners must be given notice, and if and when they respond, their responses are carefully considered. So if you give notice to someone to demolish and they come back and say, no, wait a minute, I'm fixing this, I'm going to start soon, the appropriate thing to do would be to engage. So this is what we're doing. We want it done, and we want it done fast. But we also have an appreciation for private ownership rights, etc. But we are resolute that some action is going to be taken.
DPM Cooper says the plan is to attract new Bahamian investments to the area just east of East Street. The tourism minister says at least 2 of the locations will be for small business owners.
In addition, the Ministry of Tourism, Investment and Aviation, through its Tourism Development Corporation, is developing 2 of these spaces as incubation centers for small businesses. One will cater to authentically Bahamian goods, products, handmade hopefully, that will have a significant margin for the producers and a significant attractiveness to tourists, to offer them something different from what they typically can find, t-shirts, etc. And there is already keen interest in this space. The other thing we are doing is we're ensuring that there is a space for tour operators, small ones who might need to have an office presence downtown, as well as we're looking for a space for the creative arts.
That includes those Bahamian artists that create paintings, drawings, and caricatures. The minister says proposals have also been made to further beautify the area with creative murals. Parliamentarians passed a resolution to establish a Parliamentary Human Rights Committee. After debating on Wednesday, members in the lower chamber agreed to establish the committee, which will monitor and protect the enforcement of human rights in the Bahamas. National Security Minister Wayne Munro notes that the committee will include 5 members of the Parliament and 3 senators that will determine the level at which such rights are in compliance with regional and global obligations. They will report to the Parliament every 6 months on human rights matters, make recommendations to guide the legislative process to improve human rights in the Bahamas, investigate alleged human rights violations through parliamentary inquiries, hold public hearings on human rights related issues, with powers to send for individuals and documents. Minister Munro noted that the committee would not undermine the power of the judiciary. Today, April 27th, marks the 58th anniversary of Black Tuesday. And as parliamentarians debated on Wednesday, Prime Minister Philip Davis used the opportunity during his contribution to speak to the impact which Black Tuesday had on the Bahamas and its people. On April 27, 1965, Sir Lyndon Pinley, who was at the time the opposition leader, threw the symbol of the House Speaker's authority, the mace, out of the window in protest by the Progressive Liberal Party of what they thought as unfair boundaries for election proposed or gerrymandering.
You know, this is something that we all benefited from. You who sit opposite to us, you may not have been here today had it not been for this act, right, 58 years ago. The legacy of Black Tuesday serves as a powerful reminder of the strength and resilience of us as a people. We have weathered many storms throughout our history, and we've always emerged stronger and more united. Today, as we confront new and daunting challenges, we must draw strength from the lessons of Black Tuesday and reaffirm our commitment to the democratic principles and values that have sustained us throughout our journey as a nation.
And finally, in this segment, media professionals from major networks in Washington, D.C. were told by Bahamas Ambassador to the United States, Wendell Jones, to work even harder in an era post-truth for democracy. Speaking at a reception and dinner Wednesday night in the embassy in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Jones said when professionals in media in the United States are functioning at their best, they are assisting in leading millions of people, not only in their country, but throughout the Caribbean and the Americas. Democracy thrives when people are well educated, and the role of media is critical to proper functioning of democracy, said the ambassador. He called on journalists to adhere to the tenets of ethical journalism because a lack of credibility in media does not augur well for democracy. The hosts of the affair were Richard Fowler, contributor to Fox News, and the ambassador of Trinidad and Tobago, Anthony Phillips Spencer. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back after these commercials.